Well, hello everyone. Kenneth Martin here from the Hard Hat Talks podcast. I'm joined today by Neil Salvidge. Neil, welcome.
Morning, Kenneth.
Morning, Neil. Yeah. Not too far travelled today, despite the accent, maybe?
No, I've been working up in Scotland. Had the joys of Dundee, Livingston. So I've been up here for
Dundee, Livingston?
Dundee to Livingston and
right, okay.
Bells Hill.
Bells Hill.
Yeah.
Well, you're now in the utmost centre of Scotland if you're in Bells Hill.
I enjoy it. It's lovely. I do enjoy coming up. So thank you for having me.
No problem. Neil, if you don't mind, tell the viewers and the listeners a wee bit about yourself, your company, and maybe how you got involved in the industry.
Right. Well, I've got quite a backstory, but I run my own training and development company. So I work with MVQ, assessing and training, and SVQs. So we can talk a little bit more about those, but I originally started out as a joiner. I noticed a lot of your guests are joiners, so all the best people are joiners. Sorry, folks, but I had to get that in there. I started out as a joiner from when I left school through work experience and YTS scheme. I think a few of your other guests have talked about the joys of YTS. Went through my apprenticeship program, 4.5 years as a joiner. Became a supervisor then, junior site manager, supervisor. But then 1989 kicked in. We had that huge economic crash, didn't we? Caused the company I was with, unfortunately, didn't survive it and got made redundant. Right. So, young fella, what do? I went to Africa. I just travelled the world. Africa was my first port of call. Okay. I hitched up with a South African developer and worked on projects in South Africa, honing my skills in all aspects of construction. Site management, engineering, surveying, estimating. So I learned a lot, but didn't formally get qualified as a site manager. After about 4 years, my boss said to me, Neil, you've got to make a decision. Are you going to stay here in Africa, predominantly Malawi and Uganda? Are you going to stay here and become an African? Or are you going to go home? You're a young fella. You've got to make a choice. So I came back.
Right, okay.
And by hook and by crook, I ended up working with a company called Monoflex. I don't know, do you remember?
I remember Monoflex.
Yeah, well, they're still around in various guises now, but I got involved with their geomembrane sector. So completely new sector to me, didn't know anything about it. And I ended up working on a lot of brownfield and contaminated land site projects, predominantly down in the southeast, London, southeast of England. And there was a demand to protect homes. There'd been a few incidents in the 80s where properties have been damaged by ground contaminants, either from landfill or from natural ground situations. And industry and government were looking at protecting properties. That they needed to do something. They realised it was a failing. So Monoflex were one of the kind of founding fathers in bringing geomembranes and gas protection into the UK, and that's where I cut my teeth.
Excellent.
Yeah. So.
Okay. And your company now I know it's your company yourself as a specialist consultant, so specialising then really in gas membrane protections, or?
Yeah, that's my bulk of my MVQs is with the MVQ level 2. I don't say SVQ because we're merged. We don't have a separate SVQ for gas protection. So my MVQ work in gas membrane installation. So our technicians on site who are putting the protection measures in. So
excellent. Okay. So we've seen over the years, a huge increase in the requirement to assess for gases on sites, and then obviously to protect and make sure that site direction is in accordance with standard detail, etc. I guess one of the things that I've got in my head though is, if that's not done properly, what is the ultimate outcome or the symptoms for the persons who are occupying the buildings? Because that's something we don't actually talk a lot about.
Yeah, well, obviously the effects of ground gas, we know from the incidents in the 80s, which was primarily Losco and Abisted. They were the two kind of early kind of light bulb incidents, which were sadly catastrophic. In one, 16 people were killed at Abisted, where natural gas from coal seams in the ground got into a drainage system for water management, an environmental issue going on. And the visitors, they went to see this pumping station, and they looked, as they were walking through the tunnels that were pumping the water, natural methane from the ground got into the building, and there was some cause of ignition. It could have been electrical spark. I've heard rumours said somebody lit a cigarette in the tunnel, and that caused the ignition. It blew the building to pieces. So we didn't really know then, and like a lot of things, we evolve and we learn from our mistakes. Unfortunately, some hard lessons on that road sometime. But more recently, here in Scotland, you had kind of the prime example of that in Gorebridge, which happened in 2014. The properties were actually built in 2008, 2009, I believe, in that era. But there was issues with former coal mine workings in that area. And again, site investigation was conducted, but how thorough was it conducted? How thorough was it in its due diligence of, was that good site investigation or was it not so good site investigation? So that caused an issue because there was health issues developing on the site. People were falling ill because of carbon dioxide seeping into their buildings.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, ebbing and flowing according to different conditions could be, groundwater, atmospheric conditions, different situations. In the winter, we shut our houses up, so they're less likely to let the gases out. Whereas in the summer, we have windows open and we ventilate better. So, following the incident in 2014, there was quite a serious emergency situation with some youngsters, I believe, that were involved in, they got asphyxiated or, they were in a bad way, and it kind of made everybody sit back and think, what's gone wrong here? They actually evacuated the site. So 64 properties in Gorebridge were, unfortunately, the residents had to move out, and the local authority's decision at the end of the day was to demolish the buildings and restart the site, where they basically went back to the original, let's start again.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one, because thinking retrospectively, then there's loads of properties in the UK that are built on land that probably do have gas issues. There's maybe people suffering from gas symptoms, but not necessarily knowing that that's the issue. Is there something that can be done? Over 10 years since Gorebridge, but has the industry got something now we can say, there's something we can do retrospectively, as opposed to demolishing houses and starting from the ground up again? Is there a fix, or is there something we can do?
Well, it's. I think when we look back at those older buildings that were built 1950s, 60s, post-war construction, when we needed to get properties back on, population was kind of booming. The baby boomers of the 40s and 50s. When we built houses, our methods of construction, and being an architect, we didn't have the likes of raft concrete slabs really back in the day. It was more timber construction, wasn't it? And possibly our houses were a little bit more leaky back in the day than what they are today. So our more thermal, economic properties are better at keeping those gases in the properties, but also our building regulations have moved with that. So requirements for ventilation in subfloor voids and spaces under the building, stipulate, which does assist in our ground gas protection anyway. But, in the design of ground gas protection, we should be quite specific to the requirements that's laid out in British Standard 8485, for example, which is the code of practice for design of new builds, primarily against methane and carbon dioxide. But we've got other gases that are lurking around in the ground. We've got radon, naturally a radioactive element. We've got former industrial sites with volatile organics in the ground, hydrocarbons, former petrol station sites. These are problematic sites that have to be looked at quite uniquely, because the behaviours of all the contaminants in the ground are very different, i.e. some gases are very dense and heavy, some are very light and float away, some are radioactive elements, and some are explosives, some aren't explosives. Some are acute hazards, as in they would cause us problems very quickly, whereas some of them are chronic. You can live with the contaminant, but it's not going to take its effect for maybe 5, 10, 15, if not longer, especially some of the carcinogenic problems that are out there. So
I think that's the thing. I think as architects we're seeing, and obviously there's the whole Labour push for 1.5 million homes over the next, I think they want to build that every year or whatever it is, which is crazy. But what we are seeing, the reuse of brownfield sites or even greenfield sites that are still coming with issues as well. And it's something that I think as designers, we are very conscious of having to make sure all those tick boxes are resolved. It does put a lot of projects, though. I'm not defending cost, but it does put a lot of projects in jeopardy. When you start to think about ground gases, the investigation works, the fact that we've got to do remediation works on site or gas protection measures on site, and then you look at everything else, bats, badgers, and the list goes on, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're looking at the overall development cost and thinking, really, can we cope with this?
Yeah.
And maybe that's something I could ask you in terms of what's your feeling from your clients in the industry about, your clients will understand that they need to put gas membranes in or put in gas remediation measures for the right reasons, but is there any thoughts of cutting back on costs in terms of development?
Well, you do sometimes hear the cost argument, and naturally it's a big factor for everything, isn't it? Cost drives everything in the world, money. But following the Gorebridge incident, we heard cases where gas membranes and gas protection is going to become mandatory throughout Scotland, and primarily it was because that warning shot went out of Gorebridge. We don't want that happening to us. Therefore, we put gas membranes and gas protection into everything. But it's got to be fit for purpose and appropriate. So that site investigation is quite key at categorising the level of risk of a site, because they're all going to fluctuate according to what's in the ground and how much of it and how constant is it. It might not be there in the winter, but in the summer or vice versa. So we found people putting the cheapest, most inappropriate measures in, even though they were gas protection measures, but not fit for purpose for the environment they were intended.
Right.
So, it kind of flew in the face of it a little bit. We also, in the realms of gas protection, through our planning and our regulators, in 2014 as well, no coincidence between the Gorebridge happening, but Syria introduced 735. Syria 735 was a guidance document relating to the inspection and verification of gas protection systems. So a lot of people put the two together and said, because of Gorebridge, Syria have written this. Well, it was kind of already in the pipeline at that point, because industry professionals, our geotechnical consultants, our architects, engineers were saying, we design all this good stuff, but nobody's implementing it properly. Therefore, we feel it should be checked. We have a normative reference in British Standard 8485 that talks about verification of gas protection. So it's a critical element. Local authorities therefore say any gas protection requires verification to comply with the design. So here in Scotland, everything gets verified, 100%. Now, that's brilliant. But is it brilliant if the workforce who are doing that work are not that good at doing it? Whereas you've got a workforce that might be really good at doing it, highly qualified, achieved all their MVQs, are being verified to an equal amount to those that aren't so good at doing it. The quality of work will differ, but yet verification still takes place. I would honestly say I had a little bit of a knockback here when verification came out, because the guys that drive the MVQs here for their best practice, demonstrate their competencies, saying, well, it's not really worth having it because we're being verified as much as the non-skilled workforce, where when you read the code of practice, it talks about making a professional judgment as a verifier. How much verification do I need to do of this project? But as you say, Scotland slightly drives its own regimes and how it wants to work. So here it's become commonplace 100%. Whereas when you cross the border into England, the verifiers might take a more pragmatic approach and look at the qualifications of the installers, the complexity of a design, the risk of the site, how big the site is. Is it one house or is it 500 houses?
All right.
Do we need to check every one of those houses if we know we've got a good workforce and a qualified workforce? So there's ratios kick in. And again, 735 talks about those ratios. But here in Scotland, it's gone to the 100% mark. Which is another cost driver, isn't it, Kenneth?
It is another cost driver, and it's also something I think that some local authorities, I know for a fact, don't ask for the verification, which is interesting. But most of the authorities that we've been involved in with gas membranes and measures like that have asked for some form of verification, which is kind of interesting. But I think it's that whole thing of, building. So, for example, there's so much for them to check when a building warrant application is put in, and then there's so much to be checked on site that you think, well, verification is now not done by them; it's done by a specialist consultant. We're now at the stage whereby even plumbing with SNPF can be done by a qualified plumber, as opposed to building control going in doing the air test at the end,
pressure test.
That's it. So realistically, we're kind of moving towards an industry whereby specialisms are done by specialists,
Yeah.
building controls, even architects to some extent. We're kind of maybe right now more generalists, trying to have a more holistic view of the whole process,
Yeah.
and manage the whole process for the client.
Well, I think there as well, Kenneth, it's like prompted me to think about how architects, engineers, designers put their systems together, how they design a building. And I was a couple of years ago involved in a new NHBC foundation. It was kind of research paper, and I'm going to use that term because some people are taking that as that's the new standard from NHBC. It's it was written as a research paper and advice and guidance, but somebody commented on one of the designs that was in there. It was only a suggestion. And when they looked at it, said, well, that design's not going to work for my job. Well, that's what happens. You can't just go to the mother of all websites and have every single standard detail and say, I've got to find the one that I need. Designers should be, as you know, as an architect, putting pen to paper and thinking, will this work with this product in this environment, in this situation? Whereas I think, and no disrespect to our architects and engineers, but sometimes just using a standard detail, cutting and pasting from a manufacturer, it's who's taking that design responsibility at that point.
I think that's an interesting thing because our PI insurers won't allow us to do that. So we're in a position whereby PI insurers are saying, "No, Kenneth, you're as architects, you would need to go and get a specialist to tell you what gas membrane, etc., is required." So we've just done one for a house there recently, and we were using the Visqueen gas membrane system, but that was all, if you like, detailed by us using using Visqueen's standard accredited details, but put to the verifier to check and make sure that they were happy to sign off on that basis. But certainly when it's a one-off house and something fairly standard and simple like that, I think, well, okay, we'll look at that. But if you came to us and say, we need you guys to rattle out gas membrane details and stuff for a 500 unit site, we're going, well, actually, we'll draw the foundation, but somebody else needs to take responsibility here and draw all that stuff. And that's where our PI insurers would take us. And that really is symptomatic of the whole industry just now, even when it comes to things like, for example, damp proofing for basements. So I've spent a lot of time in my career understanding how to damp proof basements and swimming pools, etc. And now our PIs insurers say, must be done by a specialist.
Your CSSWs come into play there, is it? Your certified structural waterproofers. But I think that's also a valid one where you talk about structural waterproofing and where we kind of join up with the world of ground gas and contaminated land. Often basements or subterranean structures will be put in a contaminated environment. You're trying to keep water out, you're trying to keep gas out. Water is notorious because if it does leak in, you'll see that there's a damp patch, you'll get an odour, even a puddle if it's bad. But with our ground gases, that isn't going to play out the same way. So, that aligning the two British standards as well has been a bit problematic, I'd say, between 8485 and 8102, which is the waterproofing standard. There's a few times when designers will clash and say, well, we can't do this, but we should do this. And it's a very complicated question. And, I haven't got the answers to that.
I think that's the thing I keep reminding clients. So, all these policies, regulations that we as designers face sometimes are in conflict of each other. And as architects, I think it's difficult for us, particularly when you've got bespoke projects, to design a building that complies with absolutely everything. It can be difficult. And I liken that to the story, I think it was Range Rover announced that for every time they launch a new car, they build something like 100 prototypes to test it, to crash it, to put it on these test circuits, to do everything they can with them.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but when a client comes to us with a bespoke project that's a one-off, that's never going to be built again, and says, here's my bespoke brief. You go, well, how do we actually, it's a bit more than producing a set of IKEA set of drawings and saying this is the screw and this is this. There's a lot to get in there. And there's a lot of mistakes to be made and to be caught, particularly in bespoke projects, Well,
I also think, Kenneth, we were talking before we started, we were saying about the Building Safety Act, how that's playing out. I know it's primarily, and you can correct me on the regional, obviously Scottish devolution and how rules play out here in, north of the border, but certainly down in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, the Building Safety Act is kind of making people sit up and think on all these design fronts. And it's a big thing about the competency frameworks, who's not only from the architect and the site investigation, are they competent and suitable to do it, but even through to the tradespeople on site competencies, because gas protection is sometimes put in on the lower risk sites by a non-competent workforce or less skilled, shall we say, and that's playing out quite heavily. We're seeing verifiers more specific about if this project has got to be installed by an MVQ level 2 installer, blah, blah, blah. And the number of inquiries I'm actually getting at the moment from ground workers, screeders, we're on a job, Neil, we need an MVQ. We've been told we need one.
Right.
Okay, yeah, well, we can work with people. It's a training and development role. Let's bring you on. Yeah, but I need it next week though, Neil.
Oh, right, yeah.
Well, what's your knowledge on ground gas? Been doing it for years. Okay. What membranes are you familiar working with? Oh, the red one.
The red one.
The blue one.
Right, okay.
Oh, okay. Do you know anything about those? Because again, technical questions, we need to have a baseline understanding of what we're doing. Does it match what's being put in on the drawing? That often fails in our verification. Verifiers will turn up, look at a lovely install, but it's the wrong membrane.
It's wrong membrane, yeah.
Well, I went down to the builder's merchant and he told me that we haven't got that pink one, but we've got the blue one, but that'll do you. That's fine. I'd like to know any merchant that carries PI for specifying a design change. That's a dangerous area. And I know certain merchants out there are very dubious of this now, even to the extent of some of them are restricting who they sell gas protection products to, because if they sell that product inadvertently and said, well, that'll be fine, you'll be okay, the golden thread of the Building Safety Act has put that thread through the merchant now. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because that's the same thing. It comes down to plasterboard sheets. It comes down to with the insulations, roofing membranes. It's not the first time we've turned up on site and noticed that something's different from what's specified. I'm not saying it does or doesn't fit purpose, but more often than not, we get that thing, well, that's all the merchant had, and we've got to go away and check manufacturers lists and go, right, well, that is fit for purpose, or not. Yeah. But it does happen quite a lot,
Yeah.
Neil, the point of the Hard Talks podcast is really to drive into what the big burning issue is that's affecting the industry. So I know we've had a chat about a few general things there, but what is the one thing, if you turn around and say, this is the one thing that's really affecting my industry just now?
Education and training, I'd say, is the real grassroots of what we do.
Right.
At our consultancy level, our more higher academic levels, that's pretty good because it's catered for by like the university sector. We get a lot of graduates coming in, and they learn their craft at university, the basic principles, and then they'll go to a specialist consultant and kind of hone their skills to, they might be a groundwater specialist or a contaminated land or an asbestos, whatever, landfill or wherever they are. But I'm finding our construction sector, and I actually watched your colleague the other week on here talking about training, and that is a huge problem for us. I'm going to give you an example. MVQ level 2 gas protection. When it was introduced through our trade association, the British Geomembrane Association, CITB were supportive. They helped us develop the standards. They brought the MVQ to life. We brought the first assessors on. And we got the ball rolling. And it was good to pick up our experienced workers, guys that have been out there, not formally ticketed, but they were doing a good job. They knew the basics. Came from the old school of hard knocks. You learn, learn by doing it wrong.
That's right, yeah.
So our experienced worker route for MVQs was there, and it's existed for 14 years. We're now at a point where we're saying, let's build up the game. Let's bring a specialist apprenticeship program in. So again, we've worked closely with the BGA, with CITB, also with the Property Care Association to bring partners in who can facilitate the training, the administration, etc., etc. Now, we've put a call out to members and industry. There's an apprenticeship scheme. Yeah, we're not interested. Hold on. Surely this is you're bringing newcomers, and we're desperate in this industry. We're crying out for new talent. I'm in my 50s. I ain't got long left in the tank, and they reckon 40% of our industry is going to be retiring within 10 years or something.
Yeah.
Don't quote that figure, but I know it's quite a heavy number. But bringing youngsters in, giving them the opportunity through a proper formal training scheme, and you might turn around and say, well, that apprenticeship's going to cost you 18 months of your time plus X thousand, 3,000, 4,000, I don't know. But again, our levy system of supporting MVQ training and the levy with CITB. I came through an apprenticeship route, and do you know what? I'm so grateful for that, because I learned everything the proper way. I went to college on my block release, but that seems to have been diluted now. I know some sectors are very active, and you can't get on the NVQ unless you go on a SAP scheme, specialist apprenticeship, or specialist applied program. But we are still a little bit too small in our ground gas sector.
Right.
We've got a SAP, but we're driving it. It's that education side which really needs a big boost from the government and the right people in the right places, at the likes of CITB, taking engagement from our big tier one contractors, because they've got a lot of power. They should be taking more responsibility in bringing these learners on, where it all got diluted, didn't it? It was like, sub it out, just get the subbies in. We'll have the office, you guys run the sites.
I think that's the interesting thing. I keep saying that. I think that's the interesting thing. That's my phase. But listening to yourself and some of the other guests who came on the podcast, there seems to be this, and I've seen it in my industry. 21 years next month in the industry. Everything seems to be loading into the construction industry for the right reasons, for safety, for lessons learned from previous accidents on site or disasters, even where people have died. But it's just like, we'll have another scheme for this, we'll have another policy for this, somebody will monitor this, somebody's going to do this board's been formed to do this, and then all of a sudden you think somebody's got to juggle all these plates. And actually, the process of building a building on site hasn't changed that much.
No.
But the process of getting it to site, it's just horrendous.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely. I was thinking about this the other night. I thought, of all the projects we've got on site just now, we turn up on site, and construction methods have changed, maybe, and what have you, and you've got great contractors and not so good contractors and stuff, but at the end of the day, they're still building buildings the way we kind of used to build buildings.
Well, I think there's other things in the way. Yeah, health and safety is taken first and foremost. Rightly so. We've got to protect everybody and work safely. And but bringing youngsters into the industry, I get a lot of approaches from like 16, 17-year-olds. The kids from school, like I was. School isn't for them. There's an ideal home in the world of construction for those kind of guys, because they're tactile, they're practical, they want to get dirty, they're not bothered about niceties. But I introduce them to companies. Can't take them on, Neil. They're under 18. Safeguarding, problems, insurances. They can't drive, or my company insurance won't put them on the van insurance until they're 25 or 21. These are all barriers which, yes, we've got to do things and keep everybody safe, but we've got to find openings to get the youngsters in. There's a young lad down in the West Midlands at the moment who, his dad's contacted me because he knows me personally, and he said, my son is just going from application to application, just getting rejection letters. And I'm thinking, this industry's crying out for, we're going to 1.5 million homes we're going to build, yet they're turning a youngster who's keen to pick up a hammer, pick up a trowel and learn that, and them opportunities aren't coming through as openly as he should. It is a real challenge out there, and I think hitting that, I actually had the privilege a couple of weeks ago. I went down to Westminster and I badgered my local MP on this issue, and we got talking about it. Really, really nice chap, and he actually said, I can take these on. Obviously, it's not a constituent issue; it's a national issue. That one, but we're trying to drive and speak to the right people. I'm only one person trying to do that in my our small sector. Maybe it takes, big ripples will come from that, and other sectors. Certainly at CITB NSAC, which is the national specialists who I assess through, we talk to people like Atlas at the Lightning Conductor Association, the Roofing Federation, all the specialist subcontractors federations that are out there. They've all got the same problem.
But I think that is the problem. The problem is, and that's one of the reasons why the Hard Hat podcast was devised, is to try and present the problem so that the listeners, the viewers, the MPs, those in government, those can influence, can see it's not just as easy as you guys turn around and saying, I want to build 1.5 million homes in the next X number of years.
And click your fingers and it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. We had Starmer the other day announcing that he's just told local authorities in England, just get them approved, just start building, guys. So just how's that going to work?
Well, we're flying in the face of our site investigations, our planning.
That's right.
And we see many sites where that's all gone wrong.
Yeah.
And Gorebridge, to a certain extent, that slipped through the net. And we just can't afford it, you know.
No, we kind of we there's just this. I think what's happening is there's this bottleneck of a lack of understanding and knowledge by those up high who make the decisions. They're forcing all these policies onto the people like us who've got to try and deliver it. And realistically, I mean, this, I think you might be about, we've only released at this moment in time 4 podcasts, but you're maybe about our 10th, guest. So I know some of the conversations that haven't been made public yet, and it's just a huge issue, and I'm glad we're doing the podcast because it's really starting to show to me and hopefully start to show to the listeners that this isn't an easy problem to fix,
Yeah.
And the big thing, the skills gap, where is the industry workers coming from? How do we get with the one that's just been announced was Vivian? She was talking about how do we get her 20, 24, 25 students, how do we get them into the marketplace to work? We've got national insurance going up, so employers are sitting going, well, but all of this stuff is Labour and this isn't a political show, but we've got Labour driving an ethos that they're fixing things and that things are going to get faster. I'm not too sure. I know that there is an announcement because I follow LinkedIn. I can't remember where I read it, but planning applications for new housing in England is on the up.
Okay.
Which is which I think, well, that's great. Yeah. But is it on the up to the extent that it's deliverable?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, are we compromising quality in doing that? It's no good building 1.5 million houses that are going to be leaking in 5-10 years' time.
Well, absolutely, but quality comes down to so many other things as well. I mean, we're looking at a housing development just now for a developer who's crystal clear he's keen to get it on site, but the local authority have just announced their new placemaking policies. They've announced the roads guidance and designed by streets. So we look at all of that stuff, and then we look at the density of the site that he's trying to achieve and go, that's not going to be achieved.
Yeah.
Not when you look at these new policies. And we know that the local authorities are not going to, rescind or be any lenient on the policies because it's new. It's right at the wrapper. They want this to be delivered. Yeah. And any new housing sites coming in will need to comply with it because that's what they want.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. And everybody, like you say, I speak to a lot of people at trade associations and next week I'm at the BVC, the British Verification Council, and that's on their agenda, training, qualifications, because there's a big drive. Are our verifiers qualified and competent to do the final inspections? Because again, we're seeing compromises made, the quality of verification can be, send me a picture down the phone and, WhatsApp me a picture, that'll do, that looks fine. Whereas you've got people that are doing very thorough site visits, spending many hours on site, checking, using, where it's competition again. Well, that guy's going to be cheap because he just takes a phone call and a message and job done. It's a bit concerning.
I think that's I keep saying I think that's an interesting point, but as an architect, we've got a practice where there's not everyone in the practice is a qualified architect, And we know that planning departments, not everyone in the planning department is a qualified planner, and there was discussions there about whether the heads of some of the planning departments are actually qualified,
Wow.
They've got experience, they've moved their way up the ring, but are they actually qualified planning consultants? And I guess that would be the same for building standards and everything else. So I liken it to my wife who was in hospital there, and I was chatting to some of the doctors, and I was saying to the doctor, so how I was curious, how qualified are you? I've been qualified for 6 years. I've been doing this. I'm now specialising in this particular sector. Okay, right, fine. So Sandra got a wound checked, which was an open wound. Let me just go and make sure my boss is okay with my treatment. And I thought, what, you're 6-7 years qualified? Now you're going to go to your boss, who's the consultant, to make sure that you're okay to dress that and clean that and blah, blah, blah. I thought, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? I mean, it's probably a bad thing because you don't give qualified people the autonomy to make the decisions that they should be making and going ahead with it. But it's probably a good thing in as much as that the person at the top of the tree is actually the person who's making the decision. And I think our industry suffers from we don't know what we are yet.
Well, I think it goes back as well. I always, back in my apprenticeship day, I was mentored by my joinery shop manager.
Well, was he qualified?
Super well. He went through the mill. I must admit, he was about 80. So this was in the 80s when I did my apprenticeship, and he was 80. He retired and came back to work because he loved work. But do you know what? again, qualifications, did they exist in the early days? He would have gone through the mill. He learnt in the cabinet shops of the East End of London. That's where he did his joinery. But there was always a mentorship, somebody to guide me if I ever had a question. Whereas now, when I do a lot of my MVQ work, and I'm meeting my level 2 learners, so they're at your kind of national grade qualification levels, these guys, they're not, I'll say to them, if you've got a question on a site-related or a ground gas-related technical issue, who'd you go to? I'll speak to my boss, but sometimes they don't really know what I'm on about because the higher level, and we're now starting to say, well, actually, before we take people onto the MVQ or to the upskilling or the specialist apprenticeship program, we need a nominated mentor. We vet those mentors to say, what do you know about this subject? Well, some of them are very knowledgeable, but we don't have any formal design qualifications. We mentioned CSSW for our waterproofing. We don't really have that in the world of ground gas. We've got chartered engineers, structural engineers, geotechnical consultants who are chartered. But I always sometimes have a bit of I've put my pen to paper many times and sat with an architect and we've worked out something. Can you build it? Is it cost effective and is it going to work? I think they're the fundamentals of design, aren't they, really?
That's it,
And between the two of us, I've got no chartership. I've got no degrees in design engineering. But doing that, we've worked out a design. I often see people going back to that standard. Oh, well, that one to do. We'll make that fit. But it's having people in the right place, and we've had that massive gap. When the apprenticeships finished, and I always think I must have been in the last line of the 80s who did apprenticeships. We went through the mill, then political change. Apprenticeships kind of died a death, didn't they? In the early 90s. But we've lost all those mentors, those people to train the next generation.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I'm probably running a practice where I think mentorship's important, and I think mentorship's also about telling people what they don't want to hear, but telling them what I feel is the right direction or the right solution. Happy to be challenged. I don't mind being challenged.
It's good to be challenged. I always think.
Because often the best solutions come out of being challenged. But I think the interesting thing is how qualified are the mentors? How qualified is anyone to be given any advice unless they're specialists? And I go back to that medical thing, because when you're in the medical, as I understand it, when you're in the medical profession, you do become a specialist in your medical field. And I think that's something we should all be thinking about. Is this the right way for industry to go? I'm thinking architects, it's such procuring a building is such a big problem nowadays that architects should start to be specialists in something.
Well, it goes to a bit like your NHBC had massive warranty claims for waterproofing failures, didn't they? Waterproofing, one of their top 5 claim areas, So they drove with industry, with the Property Care Association, to get the CSSWs in place so that the certified surveyors of structural waterproofing could demonstrate their competencies to give some reassurance. I could pass that on to you as the architect. We've worked together. I've done the substructure elements of tanking, waterproofing, type A, B, Cs, which I'm not CSSW, but you'd say, well, I'm relying on your qualification here, Neil, your competency. Let's work together. And it's a design team, isn't it?
Well, it is a design team. I think at the very front end, though, there's someone's going to have to pay for that. The client's going to have to pay for that. The coordination of all of that information is something that needs to get paid for. In a world where, dare I say it, when I was brought up doing architecture and design, we had design team meetings. We would sit down every fortnight, really kind of irrespective of the size of the project. We'd sit down with the design team, the engineers, the M&E guys. We'd sit down and go, right, what's happened this week, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to work. There's a clash there. Move that, do this, do that. Every fortnight. Nowadays, we get drawings emailed through. No meetings, no conversations. There's a set of drawings. And as architects, we've got to sit and look at the drawings. And it's a game of spot the difference. What's changed since the last issue? Because the younger generations coming through, don't put revision clouds on drawings. So we get a revision B, there's revision B, go, right, right, so what's changed from
Where's
the
Wally?
last
I've
one?
got to find this.
That's it. And we've now got sophisticated packages from, I think it's Adobe or whoever it is, where you can lay one PDF on top of the other, and it will highlight the difference. We go, but what was wrong with putting a revision cloud in about a drawing and
just
pick up the phone
highlight
and
it.
say, by the way, Kenneth, we're thinking about changing this. Here's the reasons why. Are you okay with that?
I think it's the old pay cheap, pay twice.
Yeah.
You know, I often say that, you know, in your site investigation, paying for poor quality, cheap investigation, is that going to pay dividends at the end of the line when, like Gorebridge, you've got to demolish a housing estate where the funding of that, obviously, you know, that's a hell of a lot of money that's got to be found. And trying to emphasize that. Another example is when site investigation, the client is very quick. They want the building to start ASAP. So rather than go through a prolonged period of kind of intrusive testing, boreholes, soil sampling, and difference in atmospheric pressures to prove that what the ground's doing, you know, they'd say, well, we'll just go belt and braces. We'll build it over and above because it saves all the geotechnical costs. When a lot of times it isn't necessarily needed, because if they'd have spent the initial money and got a report that said, you haven't really got a risk on this site, you know.
Yeah, it's the time though. That's the thing. It's time versus cost, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I've been in that position myself. You think, right, we don't have time to wait 12 weeks for gas monitoring. We'll just speak to the consultant. We'll just go belt and braces and go from there. And that's what we did. And you think, well, we've saved ourselves 12 weeks there.
And again, it's government policies that are led from the very top. How closely are they integrated with our industry? You know, I know through our British Geomembrane Association, we have links with Build UK. So Build UK is a forum for trade associations to meet, but it gives them a voice at government table. So, you know, groups and training is a big one that is being badgered. We've experienced in our sector as well, with this demand for 1.5 million homes and we need the new workforce, suddenly we're finding a lot of brokers are setting up who suddenly can assess anybody in anything.
Wow.
You can get a call. If you find the right person, just pay your money. We can get you through an MVQ in that. They might be qualified as assessors, but they're not specific to an industry speciality like ground gas or verification. But these brokers are there because there's a demand. People want qualifications. Our sector's just uncovered quite a serious incident where a qualified workforce didn't know how to weld gas protection membranes in.
Right.
When you're dealing with VOCs, and it's specified on the drawing that volatile organic compounds must have welded products by the manufacturer, by the designer, and the guys have decided to use tape systems, which don't work in those environments. The verifier rightly picked up on these issues, said to them, why aren't you welding? We've never welded. How have you got an MVQ? So the standards of our assessment, we're quite precious in our industry, not just to protect ourselves as assessors, but to protect the jobs and the ongoing safety of buildings, because ground gas is a safety critical element. If that fails, it would be catastrophic, which Gorebridge, luckily, it wasn't catastrophic, but it was very close. Yeah, so those scenarios are playing out to us a lot.
So it's interesting then that you talk about training as one of the biggest industry challenges that you've got, particularly in your sector, because the question that was left by the previous guest for you,
I was ready for this,
was, and not just about your sector, but how do we fix the skills gap in industry?
I haven't had a magic wand and
if you'd imagine,
and hindsight, it would be, it'd be marvellous tools. I think bringing back at the real grassroots level, and I've got a 14-year-old son, and I see what our education system does. It didn't help during the Blair era where every child was going to go to university. You know, children in education, there's millions of them, and they're all different keys. But the government want them all to go in the same lock and turn the same way, which it doesn't work.
No.
They're all unique locks. We need 1 million locks for 1 million children. But we could be doing a lot more with our grassroots to encourage youngsters at school to, let's make construction sexy, shall we? What could, do we need image, coming on site? What could attract people in? They don't like the mud. They don't like the cold weather. They don't like the long hours, the driving, and it is a hard industry. But I can speak, if you can survive that, there's rewards to be had at the end of the day. And at the end, we go to work for, one, to be happy, and two, to earn money, don't we?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely, yeah.
what we've all got to achieve. So I think at the really early stages of school construction, I always remember when my son was at primary school, they asked different parents with different jobs to come in and tell the kids, they were only like 6 or 7, what we did. So I took all my PPE in.
Right, okay.
The kids loved it, putting a hard hat on, wearing a high vis, gloves that don't fit them. And I brought a few tools along, obviously health and safety mindful.
Yeah.
But the kids, that early engagement, and I still see one of my son's got a group of friends that have all grown with him. They're all 14, nearly 15 now. And one of the lads saw me a few weeks ago. He said, I remember when you brought that hard hat into our school. I said, are you going to go into construction? He said, I'm actually thinking of doing carpentry at school as tech for my GCSEs, which we have in England. Because he said, I think building, construction, carpentry, I said, you know what? I can't fault it. It's served me well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about. I keep saying that. That's one of the interesting things.
That's interesting.
That is interesting, isn't it? Yeah. But we do a bit of work with schools and going into schools. Scott will take in bits of kit, etc., and the kids just love the drone. I mean, the drone is just something they go towards, which is
they're all quite techie as well, aren't they? They're good with the CAD and all that.
It. But I think my generation, my daughters are, one's just left high school, just left 6th year, one's going into 6th year, so we're just about done with formal education. But my friends have all got kids similar ages, and the thought is that as we move towards an AI world, that some jobs are going to be not safe. That they will be replaced by AI, and that probably getting a trade in the construction industry is going to be a great thing. Working with your hands and growing that skill set is something that's going to see you set for a job for life. Because I do think that there are certain jobs that, unless we're sending in robots, that there will always be a job for people working on construction sites.
I think in time immemorial, carpenter has been the most traditional. Carpenters, stonemasons, thatchers, traditional biblical trades have been around a long time, and it's going to take a long time to get rid of them. We still need them, even with modern methods of construction. You'll find the backbone of the industry are the people with their hands, tightening a spanner, turning a screw, putting a wire in a fuse box or whatever. Those trades, you try and get a tradesperson to come to your house now to come and fix your guttering or, fortunately, 90% of stuff I'll do myself. I'll have a go.
Yeah.
My neighbour, who is a lot younger than me and hasn't come from that, he goes, how do you manage to do all these jobs? Well, I learned lots of things, even from my dad. My dad was an electrician. Not that I took wire houses, but I know how to wire a plug and how to correct my lighting in the garden if it goes wrong. And
I think that's it. But it's about having a go, isn't it? I learned a lot of stuff from my dad as well. And it's interesting because he's no longer, I keep saying that, it's interesting, but he's no longer with us. He's passed away. And there was a fence between my mum and dad's house and the next door neighbours that was needing replaced. And I thought, right, I'll do that. Because I watched him doing stuff, and helped him for years and years and years. So that was me sorting the fence. And I didn't quite get it finished on the Saturday, and I thought, right, I'll need to come back on Sunday. So I left the tools, sitting out. Nice night, left them sitting out, and I had put the tools away.
Yeah.
All right, okay. So then I put the tools in the garage, thinking, right, they're in the garage, at the front of the garage, and then that's not where they go. No, because they've got a specific place in the garage. And that's one of the things that I think we need to try and instill in our younger generation is that there's a lot of practical things out there that just need to happen. Things need to be done a certain way for a certain reason. You don't always need to understand what that reason is. You just need to accept that the reason is the reason and just get on with it, So let's see what we can do there. Maybe we'll tease a few more guests and see if they've got any thoughts on how we can.
Well, I've been running some initiatives down in the West Midlands where I live. I've obviously. I think it's great as well, Kenneth, that you're doing these promotional videos and podcasts. I've been doing the same. I've got my Gassing On channel. I had to give it a plug in there.
Go for it. We'll be sure to watch it.
But it's good because it highlights its easy access with YouTube and Spotify and etc. But I run a brownfield breakfast down in Birmingham.
Right.
So basically, get contractors. Somebody that's just doing a job and suddenly you've got to deal with contaminated land. We've got a dirty site. What? I've never done this before. So I do little breakfast briefings, about an hour and a half. Come and get a bacon roll, all free.
Okay.
Normally I get a sponsor to come in and
Yeah.
and I just give a brief insight. What's it all about? How's it work? What are the pitfalls? Where you got to watch? So little incentives like that I do. I would like to bring it up to Scotland. Maybe we can do something together on a brownfield breakfast up here. Maybe.
Well, it sounds interesting. If there's a bacon roll in it, I'll definitely be there.
I've got you on that one, Kenneth. I'm not going to let you escape on that. So.
Excellent, fantastic. So, just before we round it off, have you got a question for our next guest?
Well, I like the way you talked about your father, inspiration, and parents. You know, my dad was inspirational, but I'd like our next guest. Who was the most inspirational person that is like encouraged you, motivated you in your career? Yeah, that's my question to them.
That's an easy one for me, Lee. Thank you for that. Yeah. Neil, if someone's interested in getting a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, you can find me on my website, www.neilsalvidge.co.uk.
Right, yep.
So I'm out there on my website. You'll find me on social media. So on Facebook, you'll find me through Gas Membrane Installation United.
Right, okay.
That's more of a trade one for our technicians. I'm also there on LinkedIn. So my profile, Neil Salvidge on LinkedIn. Yep. And also, I live on YouTube quite a lot, so that I'm there with my Gassing On channel. So
excellent. You'll
come and find me. A lot of insights there as well. So anybody that wants to have a chat, and always you'll find my phone details on my website as well.
Excellent. So. Well, I'm a big YouTube fan. That's my Saturday mornings is spent before my golf. There's a couple of hours watching YouTube.
Yeah.
The kids and the wife are usually in bed, so I sit with my coffee, YouTube it, and listen stuff. So I'll be sure to subscribe to your channel.
Excellent. Yeah.
And Neil, I think it's been interesting. That word again. It's been fantastically interesting. Gas membranes and those issues associated with it are something that really do start to affect us as architects, and also affect our clients as people who want to build buildings. So thank you for coming on.
Brilliant.
I'm sure the listeners have had some great information, and I look forward to catching up with you for that bacon roll.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hard Hat Talks. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. That way, you'll be sure to never miss an episode. If you've got any feedback or a topic you want us to tackle, please drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. Till next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and keep your hard hat on.